Thank you, Boris. You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Cabrera in New York. Great to have you with me. Up first this hour, full court press. The president and his supporters in fierce fighting mode, unleashing a series of attacks on TV and on Twitter aimed at discrediting the Russia investigation. A pro-Trump group released a new ad targeting special counsel Robert Mueller and members of his legal team who have donated to Democrats. The title, Witch Hunt.
FBI Director Comey leaks information to the press, hoping to start an investigation. The ploy works, and his good friend and former boss, Mueller, is chosen to direct it. Then who does Mueller select to help lead the independent investigation? 4 top lawyers, all major donors to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic National Party. Only in Washington could a rigged game like this be called independent.
I want to point out special counsel Robert Mueller is a registered Republican. The president also firing off this tweet that may be an effort to redirect attention from the Russia investigation. Quote, Hillary Clinton colluded with the Democratic Party in order to be crazy Bernie Sanders. Is she allowed to so collude? Unfair to Bernie. I want to bring in CNN White House correspondent Athena Jones. Athena, the president also addressed the Russia probe in a new interview, taking a swipe at President Obama.
He did. Hi, Anna. Let's go ahead and play what he had to say on Fox.
Well, I just heard today for the first time that Obama knew about Russia a long time before the election, and he did nothing about it. But nobody wants to talk about that. To me, you know, in other words, the question is, if he had the information, why didn't he do something about it? He should have done something about it.
So there you hear the president sounding like he's acknowledging what U.S. intelligence agencies concluded months ago, that Russia did, in fact, meddle in the U.S. election in 2016, and then placing the blame squarely on President Obama. It's important to note that while critics of the Obama administration's handling of this entire matter believe that the administration didn't act strongly enough or swiftly enough or publicly enough, it isn't as though the Obama administration did nothing. The Washington Post includes a lot of details about the warnings that they gave in their report, including one as early as August by then CIA Director John Brennan to Russian intelligence. Then, of course, President Obama's warning directly to Vladimir Putin in September on the sidelines of the G20 summit in China. And then later in October, Susan Rice, the then national security advisor, delivered a message to Putin once again through Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, that we've been talking about so much. And then, of course, in December, we saw those sanctions, the 35 diplomats kicked out of the country, the 2 Russian compounds that were closed, and the economic sanctions imposed on various individuals. So it isn't as though the Obama administration did nothing. Anna?
All right, Athena Jones at the White House for us. Thank you. Let's get straight to our panel. Joining us, CNN political commentator and former Reagan White House official Jeffrey Lord. Also CNN political analyst and Washington Post columnist Josh Rogin. And White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner, Sarah Westwood. Jeffrey, President Trump says he, quote, just found out Obama knew Russia was interfering before Election Day. But I want to play for you an exchange from that 3rd presidential debate before the election.
We have 17 intelligence agencies, civilian and military, who have all concluded that these espionage attacks, these cyber attacks, come from the highest levels of the Kremlin, and they are designed to influence our election. I find that deeply disturbing, and I think it's time.
She has no idea whether it's Russia, China, or anybody else.
I am not quoting myself. I am quoting 17 intelligence. Do you doubt 17 military and civilian?
Jeffrey, this was October. How can he say he just found out?
Well, what he's saying there is it seemed very clear that Secretary Clinton had no idea who was doing what. That's all he was saying there. I mean, that's a whole different thing than saying President Obama knew and he didn't do anything, which is also true. I mean, the real problem here is that President Obama and Secretary Clinton established themselves as being essentially weak in dealing with the Russians. The Russians had contempt for both of them. And so, I mean, when you think that President Obama feels that what he's really doing something by saying, and I think I'm quoting directly here, cut it out to Vladimir Putin, I I mean, Putin has got to be laughing himself silly to that kind of thing. They simply didn't take President Obama seriously.
There has been criticism of President Obama's administration and the actions or inactions that happened following the intelligence briefing the president at the time, but it's easy to point the finger the other direction. What is President Trump doing right now to either punish Russia for what happened in the election, or to, and more importantly perhaps, make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I do think that he's taking steps. I think he's got a commission appointed to start doing this. I think Mayor Giuliani is involved.
That commission has nothing to do with Russia. That commission is taking a look at whether illegal immigrants voted in the election.
No. I think he's trying to take a look at cybersecurity in this country, which is a very, very important thing. There's no question about that. And I think he is going to do something about it. But the bottom line here, as that Washington Post story confirmed, there was no meltdown on Election Day. No election, I mean, they didn't come in here to the lower precinct of East Pennsboro Township in Cumberland County in central Pennsylvania and fool around with the voting machines. It simply didn't happen.
Right. Sarah, in the book, The Art of the Deal, Trump writes, quote, "Good publicity is preferable to bad, but from a bottom line perspective, bad publicity is sometimes better than no publicity at all. Controversy, in short, sells." So President Trump keeps tweeting attacks at President Obama and going after Hillary Clinton. Is Trump going back to what gave him the greatest success, making headlines that won't do anything to advance his agenda, but are sure to create controversy or attention?
I don't know that he's going back to it, because he never really left it. This is something that he has carried on since he was a reality television personality, something that he's clung to throughout the beginning of his presidency. He has not found the line between embracing the intelligence community's accepted findings that Russia interfered in the election in at least some capacity, and rejecting the allegations that his campaign colluded with Russia. I think Democrats have tried to conflate the two a little bit, or at least muddy the waters between those two things. And so President Trump has just sort of rejected all of the Russia intrigue. But those are two very separate issues, and he has not found a way to thread the needle between acknowledging what's sort of accepted fact in Washington, which is that Russia meddled, while still denying these so far unsubstantiated allegations that his campaign had anything to do with the Russian meddling.
Well, his tweets this weekend seem to say that he now believes Russia did indeed meddle in the election. But Josh, isn't Trump just doing what all presidents elected as agents of change do? Blame the incumbent predecessor? I mean, you rarely heard President Obama speak about the economy without mentioning President Bush.
Well, yeah, and that's sort of the hypocrisy of it. He criticized the Obama administration for not doing more, and at the same time, if they had done more, he would have criticized them for meddling in the election and adding politics to it, and that's of course why they didn't do more. So there was nothing that the Obama administration could have done with regard to the Russian meddling that would have satisfied Trump. He has sort of talked himself into a corner here. A cybersecurity commission is just not going to cut it. If they're now going to say that the Russian meddling was real, that Obama didn't do enough, they're going to have to put their money where their mouth is. There's a bunch of sanctions coming from Congress. There's a potential Trump-Putin meeting coming up next month in Germany on the sidelines of the G20. So, okay, the argument that he's totally being consistent just doesn't hold water. Okay, he totally reversed himself. Now, is he going to stick to this new line that the Russians did interfere and we have to do something about it? Who knows? Who really knows? We'll have to wait and see.
Let's pivot to health care for a moment. Jeffrey, the Senate's health care bill would fail if 3 Republicans hold out and no Democrats cross the aisle. Some of those leaning no or undecided say they don't want to be rushed. If the plan is solid, why not let these senators go home, sell it to their constituents, and then take the vote later?
Well, to borrow from President Trump, this is where you get into the art of the deal. And frankly, this has been going on in Washington since Washington, D.C. was invented. You get a vehicle through the House, you get a vehicle through the Senate, and then the negotiation really begins. So that's what's going on here, and I'm sure the president will be very heavily involved in it. I myself wish that there were a little less secrecy on the Senate side and more hearings and et cetera, but I'm always encouraged when I hear people like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Mike Lee speak up on this issue, so I'm sure that there will be negotiations forthcoming.
Let's take a look at the latest poll on health care. The Kaiser Foundation finding more Americans than ever view Obamacare favorably. Meanwhile, just 30% say they like the GOP's replacement plan. Should that worry Republicans, Jeffrey?
Oh, I'm sure it probably will worry Republicans. I'm not sure that it should, but I think it will. And, you know, what you've got here is a situation where the health care... I'm sorry, what?
If it shouldn't worry them, why not?
Well, it shouldn't worry about them because they should do their jobs and they should be able to sell their ideas on this to the American people. That's what leadership is. I mean, you know, as I always talk about President Reagan, he was magnificent at going on television and educating the American people about subject A, B, or C, or going out there and giving speeches and making a pitch for his beliefs. That's what being an elected official is about, and I would hope Republicans do that, because we've got a situation here where the Obamacare is imploding. I mean, one insurance company after another is announcing they're leaving this, that, or the other state, and you're leaving people with no choices, no options. That's not good.
Now, President Trump has been selling that message very consistently, but he seems to have sort of had one foot in, one foot out on the GOP's plans. In fact, today he admitted he called the House health care bill mean. Do Republicans feel like President Trump is going to have their back if there's backlash to this Senate bill, or do they think he's going to throw them under the bus, Sarah?
Certainly, President Trump only got involved on the House side after the text of the AHCA had been released publicly. Then he started whipping members. That's sort of more or less what you saw on the Senate side, although you did have HHS Secretary Tom Price and the Vice President pretty involved behind the scenes in shaping that legislation. Now President Trump seems ready to get involved in trying to convince members to get on board. But again, this is a president that is ideologically flexible. He's not married to any one specific policy. He's really just interested in making a deal for the GOP health care bill. So it's not clear that he has a preference. He just wants to see the bill passed, and he's facing more or less the same dilemma that Republicans in the House faced, which is that the coalition of Republicans opposed to this bill are so diverse. You have centrists like Dean Heller, then you have very conservative members like Ted Cruz. It's hard to see what sort of narrow path they'll walk to reconcile their objections.
Josh, smarter politically to try to jam the bill through before the break, or to wait and have the vote after?
Yeah, I think they're committed to doing it quickly because they know in the end that process doesn't really matter to most people. I mean, there'll be complaints from Democrats, but the point is to get it done and figure it out later. Now, the downside is what you mentioned, is that people around the country have no idea what's in this bill. They haven't had it explained to them, and that causes problems with its levels of support. But, you know, you can understand why Republicans are pushing this quickly, because if they can't get it done fast, and then they probably won't get it done. And in the end, all the complaints about process will evaporate once the bill gets
the idea of striking while the iron is hot. Jeffrey Lord, Josh Rogan, and Sarah Westwood, thanks to all of you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming up, the president says he wants a health care bill with heart, but Republicans have major concerns. Would they pass up a chance to repeal Obamacare? Republican Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania joins us after the break. Plus, staffing up, special counsel Robert Mueller makes new additions to his team, including a man with a skill that could be crucial. And they're gonna need a bigger boat. Incredible video here, shocking moments as a humpback whale jumps from the yacht. 5 days, 52 Republicans, and one big question: can Mitch McConnell get it done? The Senate Majority Leader is hunting for the votes he'll need to push the Republican health care plan through the Senate, and he wants a vote this week, before the 4th of July recess, giving members just a handful of days to dig through the 142-page bill, and even less time to consider it once the score from the Congressional Budget Office comes out later this week. Already the math is proving to be a problem. McConnell can only afford to lose 2 of his 52 Senate Republicans for the bill to pass, and so far 5 GOP senators have come out vocally against it, arguing that it doesn't go far enough to repeal Obamacare, that it doesn't lower premiums, or that too many people will lose coverage. And the Republicans opposing the bill doesn't even count those that are still undecided. For their part, Democrats have described the bill as mean, a word the president also used to describe the House version. And this morning, President Trump owned it.
They actually used my term, mean. That was my term, because I want to see I want to see, and I speak from the heart. That's what I want to see. I want to see a bill with heart.
My next guest voted against the House version of the GOP health care bill, and that may come as a surprise because he is a Republican from Pennsylvania. Congressman Charlie Dent, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Anna, for having me on the program.
Are you concerned about the Senate version of the bill as well? Republicans have been talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare, we know, for nearly a decade. With majorities in both houses of Congress and Trump in the White House, where do you feel your party got it wrong?
Well, Anna, I would say this. First, in 2010 and 2012, after Obamacare was initially passed, the mantra was repeal and replace. But after President Obama was reelected in 2012, it became fairly obvious to me that the health care law, Obamacare, would be baked in for another 4 years. It wouldn't be repealed during that time. So here we are. And I think the reality is that parts of the health care law do need to be repealed. Parts of it do need to be replaced. Parts of it need to be repaired, reformed, and overhauled. And other parts need to be retained. And I think one of the challenges we've faced is that our bumper sticker slogan, was never matched by the policy. So now here we are all these years later, and we've got a little bit of a challenge. The Senate bill, as I understand it, is, and I'm still reading it, I want to see a CBO score, but the bill is structurally similar to the House version. In some respects, it provides a little softer landing, say, on Medicaid. In other respects, it's a little harsher in terms of the CPI index. So there are still some challenges with this legislation as I see it.
Now, it wasn't just repealing Obamacare that the president was promising. He had other promises regarding health care as well. Listen.
Save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts.
I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid.
You're going to end up with great health care for a fraction of the price.
So you heard him. No cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, cheaper health care. Are those promises less important than making sure Obamacare is repealed?
Well, that rhetoric certainly makes this task even more challenging. As Republicans, I think we have to come to accept the fact that we have promised a replacement plan, and we have to make sure that our replacement plan does provide adequate coverage. And one of the reasons I voted against the House version of the health care bill was because there was just simply too hard a landing on Medicaid, that the tax credits weren't sufficient to help people who would be transitioning off of Medicaid onto the exchanges. And so the Senate is trying to put together a better bill. I'm still reviewing it. I'm anxious to see this CBO score, to see what the coverage numbers will be and what the cost increase are projected to be as well. So I think there's still a bit of work to do here. I don't know that this bill could be considered as quickly as some would like to see it considered this week.
Let's talk more about that, because I know there has been criticism about how quickly Senator McConnell is rushing the process, trying to vote this week. Here's a colleague in the Senate, Ron Johnson, one of those currently withholding his support for the bill.
I would like to delay the thing. There's no way we should be voting on this next week. No way. There's no way.
Are you going to work to stop it? Are you going to work to stop a vote next week?
I have a hard time believing Wisconsin constituents or even myself will have enough time to properly evaluate this for me to vote for a motion to proceed. So I've been encouraging leadership, the White House, anybody I can talk to for quite some time. Let's not rush this process.
So why rush the process? What's the risk of waiting to have the vote?
Well, well, first, I generally agree with Senator Johnson that we shouldn't rush this, although at the end of the day, members of the Senate and the House, of course, will be judged more on the product than the process. And so I can't say I can speak to why this is being rushed. I suspect that Senator McConnell, who is a very skillful legislator, wants to get this issue off the agenda one way or the other, either successfully or unsuccessfully, because I think many members, and I've said this, one of the criticisms I had of the way we handled health care in the House is that many of my colleagues saw health care reform as a speed bump on the road to tax reform, because we kept talking about, or too much discussion about tax baselines, making sure the baseline is low enough to do tax reform instead of talking about how we're going to make sure people are adequately covered. And I think that made our debate in the House that much more difficult. And I think to a certain extent the same is true in the Senate.
What do you see as the blowback a GOP senator like Ron Johnson would face from President Trump or Republican opposition if he does ultimately vote against the bill?
Oh, well, look, I voted against the House version, but at the end of the day, I'm accountable to the people of my constituency in the 15th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. They're the people who elect me. They're my bosses. You know, we don't work for the leadership. Senator Johnson doesn't work for his leadership or for the president. He works for the people of Wisconsin. And I think that he's trying to do his best. I would hope he's doing his best to, you know, to try to reflect their interests. So at the end of the day, again, I am not worried about the blowback I get in Washington. I'm more worried about the blowback that I would get back here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Did you ever hear from President Trump or someone in his administration after you voted no on the House bill?
Not afterwards, but before I sure did. Yeah, I had a couple. I had meetings, you know, with the president, 2 meetings with the president, met with the vice president, met with Secretary Price.
What did he say to you?
A lot of folks. Well, you know, I expressed to President Trump my concerns with the House version of the bill about the Medicaid expansion being rolled back was going to be too harsh, the tax credits not being sufficient. I told them, too, that I thought the Planned Parenthood piece should be taken out of the bill. I don't think that has anything to do with Obamacare. And I also thought that maybe some of the revenues on higher income people be retained to help pay for our reforms. Yeah, he took it pretty well the first time I said it. The second time and third time, well, not so much. But the point is, I held my ground, but I understand their positions, although even the president now has acknowledged, apparently based on those reports from the meeting with the senators a week or so ago, that he thought the House bill was too harsh.
All right, Congressman Charlie Dent, we will leave it there. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Hey, thank you, Anna, for having me.
Up next, turning up the heat in the Russia probe, the special counsel adds new lawyers to his team, including one with a certain knack for flipping witnesses. Should the White House be worried? Has been expanding his staff for the investigation into possible ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. One of the latest additions to his investigative team, Andrew Weissman, a longtime federal prosecutor who led the Enron investigation, dozens of organized crime cases, and has a reputation as someone particularly skilled at flipping witnesses. So much to talk about as Mueller's team takes shape. Joining us now, CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Danny Savalos, and CNN law enforcement analyst and former FBI supervisory special agent James Galliano. So, Danny, what message does this latest addition to Mueller's team send the White House?
That they mean business. I mean, to some who are against this entire investigation, it might appear that this is a team that is staffed largely with those who are favorable to Democratic interests. But on the other hand, no matter how you look at it, this is simply a talented team that is going to get at the truth, you would think, based on their reputation and based on their career.
James, how big of an asset is it to have someone like Weissman, who has this reputation for being able to convince witnesses to turn on their friends and their accomplices?
I agree. He's got a stellar reputation from his days in the Department of Justice. I think the team assembled is a good team. Unfortunately, I think what people on the outside see is they look at this from the optics perspective. And in law enforcement, we tend to shy away from optics. So you can argue, well, the Federal Election Commission has said they made these particular donations, and that's unsavory. But Director Mueller is a registered Republican, and most people on the Hill, I believe that he is an impartial and unbiased prosecutor.
And he has served in both Democratic and Republican administrations. Your point, though, about the donations to Democratic campaigns, Danny, a former Bush White House press secretary, Ari Fleischer, tweeted this, saying, "I served with Mueller. I respect him and continue to believe in his integrity, but these hires are a mistake. He should have found a political staff." Does he have a point?
He does, in the sense that this could be a staff that is perceived as having interests favorable to Democrats. But on the other hand, the rules regarding recusal and conflict of interest in the DOJ, they do call for recusal in cases where there are conflicts, personal relationships like family, presumptively. But when it comes to friendships, it's a case-by-case basis. And in those instances, deference must be given to the personal opinion of the DOJ employee, him or herself.
So you don't see they're there?
Unless they believe it, unless it's glaring, I don't think so. Again, the DOJ regulations call for a presumption in the case of family, but if it's a friendship, then you have to give the personal opinion, and I don't know if you're agreeing with me there, James, but you have to give the personal opinion, the subjective opinion is the word used, to the individual DOJ employee. So if those individuals think they cannot be apolitical, if they think they have a conflict of interest, then they have an obligation under the regulations, under the U.S. Attorney's Manual, to raise it with their superiors and run it up the flagpole. And if it is a conflict, it should be addressed.
And Mueller has not raised this, but the president has pointed to a friendship between Mueller and Comey, and he used the word bothersome. He's talking about it, in fact, today on Fox. Let's listen.
He's very, very good friends with Comey, which is very bothersome, but he's also, we're going to have to see. I mean, we're going to have to see in terms, look, there has been no obstruction, there has been no collusion, there has been leaking by Comey, but there's been no collusion, no obstruction, and virtually everybody agrees to that. Robert Mueller's an honorable man, and hopefully he'll come up with an honorable solution.
James, what's your reaction to the president even suggesting Mueller could be biased?
I agree with Danny. I mean, Danny lays it out on what the requirements for former Director Mueller are. And former Director Mueller and former Director Comey were both colleagues at the Department of Justice. They do have a personal relationship. And when I argued several weeks ago that I thought it was an improper appointment, not because of either man, I believe both men are honorable and decent men. I trust both of them implicitly. They were the 6th and 7th FBI directors. I served under 4. They were the last 2, and they were decent men. My argument is this. I counter the folks that say Robert Mueller's not the judge. He's the prosecutor. And prosecutors across the country have relationships with police who are often the witnesses or the folks bringing them the evidence.
Yes, you're right.
And that's what this is. I'm troubled because I look at this and say, of all the special prosecutors you could have chosen in this situation where your key and central figure in the investigation is an FBI director who has a close, personal, and Dana, I hate to use the term familial, but it really is relationship with him. I just think that from the outside, folks are going to look at this and thinks it smacks of impropriety and think the fix is in.
I agree with James because you can't perfectly analogize this to a prosecutor in a trial situation because he's absolutely right. U.S. attorneys routinely are friendly with the special agents and the case agents that are helping them prosecute the case and will ultimately be the friendliest of witnesses on the stand. But this is a very different situation. It's not exactly the same. This is an investigation and a political investigation. And the appearance of a conflict sometimes, oftentimes under the regulations, can be enough.
Well, it could give reason for people to question the outcome of the investigation, which is a big problem. But we'll have to wait and see where the trail leads. Guys, thank you both, Danny and James. Good to see you both. Coming up, the tale of the tapes. 41 days after hinting he had recordings of his conversations with fired FBI Director James Comey, the president finally admits he was, and with a thinly veiled threat. And now, after more than a month of non-answers or half answers, we know the truth. The president was bluffing. He has no recordings of his conversations with now fired FBI Director James Comey, and the president is offering no apology.
My story didn't change. My story was always a straight story. My story was always the truth. But you'll have to determine for yourself whether or not his story changed. But I did not take.
It was a smart way to make sure he stayed honest in those hearings.
Well, it wasn't very stupid, I can tell you that.
CNN's Gary Tuchman brings us the now debunked tale of the tapes.
When President Trump sent out the tweet saying James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations, he could have sent out another tweet a minute later, correcting the record. Instead, he waited over 59,000 minutes, 41 days, nearly 6 weeks, to declare, quote, I did not make and do not have any such recordings.
Well, thank you.
The president was asked early on about his claim.
That I can't talk about. I won't talk about that. All I want is for Comey to be honest, and I hope he will be, and I'm sure he will be, I hope.
Today with your tweet, no elaboration from the president why he couldn't or wouldn't talk about it. And then weeks later in the Rose Garden.
Do tapes exist of your conversations with him?
Well, I'll tell you about that maybe sometime in the very near future. Oh, you're going to be very disappointed when you hear the answer, don't worry.
Not clear what the president meant by his disappointment comment. His staff also did nothing to clear up the matter.
Wow, got a full house.
This from White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer on the day of the original tweet.
I assume you're referring to the tweet, and I've talked to the president. The president has nothing further to add on that.
This from 3 days later.
I think I made it clear last week that the president has nothing further on that. I answered the question over and over again the same way.
And this from Deputy White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders this month.
Could you try to find out? A lot of people are interested, as you might imagine.
Sure, I'll try to look under the couches.
Raise your right hand.
When James Comey testified before Congress, he tried to emphasize his own credibility by saying,
Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
But Lordy, it now appears there are not. Gary Tuchman, CNN, Atlanta.
Coming up, Supreme Court suspense. Retirement rumors swirl around Justice Anthony Kennedy and whether a big announcement will come as early as tomorrow.